I'm a firm believer that Signal is one of the best messengers, and so when I start getting messages from people on Signal that there's this thing that bypasses the encryption, everyone freaks out, and I wanted to make a video clearing it up and explaining what's going on, how you can keep yourself safe, and if this is really a concern. Sneak preview kind of is, but probably not for the reason you think. So the Forbes article is the one that I saw going around the most, and it's called Hackers Bypass Signal, Telegram, and WhatsApp Encryption to Read Your Messages. And the wording here is pretty important. So there's a technical report that I'll dive into, but it goes through how hackers can read your private messages because of an Android piece of malware, which is a banking Trojan that goes beyond the normal boundaries of similar software that does this. Now, before I clarify exactly what's going on, I want to be very clear about something that is called end-to-end encryption. So the concept of end-to-end encryption is that it gives you basic security when it comes to communicating with somebody else. If you have your loved one, your mom, your son, whoever it is, and you add them on an end-to-end encrypted messenger, each of you has your own private key. And the concept here is that only you two can decrypt the messages. It is end-to-end encrypted, and no one in between you two can read your messages. However, on your device, you have your encryption key, and you are decrypting your messages. This is why if you use WhatsApp, Signal, Telegram, whatever you're using, if you don't have a separate passcode to get into the app, if you unlock your phone for somebody, they can still pull up your messages. It doesn't matter if they're end-to-end encrypted if somebody can still read your messages. So that is actually what is being exploited here. It's not that crazy. They're not actually breaking the encryption, but this is still something very important to talk about. And what this overall is called, by the way, if you guys want the technical term, is endpoint security. Just want to emphasize again that the encryption isn't broken, but it's being bypassed at the device level. So this is actually something called Sternus, and this is from the Threat Fabric, and they did some good research on this. This is a privately operated Android banking Trojan, and it supports a broad range of fraud-related capabilities, including a full device takeover. But the really interesting thing is that it also can bypass encrypted messaging protection. And the way it actually gets your banking credentials, which seems to be the main thing that this thing tries to do, is it has convincing fake login screens that replicate legitimate banking apps. It also provides attackers with extensive remote control, enabling them to observe all user activity, inject text without physical interaction, and even black out the device screen while executing fraudulent transactions in the background without the victim's knowledge. So they're essentially taking control of your device remotely, as if you just handed your phone unlocked to some stranger who wanted to do malicious things with your apps. I'm going to leave this in a description. If you're more technical, you're probably going to really geek out over how they do data exfiltration and how they replicate things and the kind of permissions they use to get access to things. This is nothing new. We've actually seen one called Blankbot, and we've covered a lot of these on Surveillance Report in the past, how there are these just pieces of malware that are designed to steal your banking information. And it's really important to mention that a lot of this does take place outside of the Google Play Store. So I know we're doing coverage about how Google's trying to clamp down on what they're saying is this threat exactly, but there are ways to prevent this from happening to your device without shutting down all of the freedom on Android. And I'm covering that whole saga in my other content as well. I think the real story here is that things that were traditionally going after cryptocurrency wallets, going after banking apps, are now kind of being pivoted to also target messengers. This really does show that there is a lot of sensitive information that happens within your messages. A general rule of thumb I have is if a scammer or a malicious person wants access to something in your life, there's probably something valuable about it. And this is why we talk about why privacy is important, digital rights are important, why your relationships are important, keeping them safe is important, because there's a reason why people who have nefarious purposes are after them. People share passwords in Signal, they share sensitive information about where they live, their relationship. So perhaps you hack an important person's husband or wife, and then you that's actually your way to get to the actual person's Signal account, and you get their username from Signal because you got access to their Signal app. These are the kind of things you have to think about for why these attacks exist in the first place, and also why you should keep yourself safe from them. And I'll talk about what you should do to keep yourself safe from this stuff very shortly. All these countries in Europe are talking about digital sovereignty, but it's important that you also protect yours. This is a fundamental issue of your own digital sovereignty, which is the right to control what happens on your own device so that someone's not literally remote controlling your own phone without your knowledge. Now, the bad thing is that this is crazy sophisticated, and there's some really smart people behind this stuff. And again, please read this if you want to read how sophisticated it goes. But the good news is, despite how sophisticated this is, it's actually really hard to pull off, and you as a user have to make a lot of mistakes for this to happen to you. First thing is be careful where you install apps from. I highly recommend sticking with the Google Play Store if you don't know what you're doing, and only getting apps you actually need from the Play Store that are overall trustworthy and well acknowledged to be safe applications. If you are going outside of the Play Store, which is also extremely safe, as long as you're not doing anything crazy weird, F-Droid is a wonderful app store. If you want apps from the Play Store, but without Google, you can actually get everything from the Aurora store. And again, make sure you're downloading safe applications. That's kind of a step one here. Step two, this requires granting the accessibility services permission on your Android device. And this is a very dangerous permission to give, and is how they're able to do all of this crazy stuff. It's the closest thing to essentially granting someone access to your entire device and letting them do whatever they want to it. Browserstack.com did a good little overview of all of the security and privacy concerns with giving up the permission for this. And they also go through how you can check. So go to open your settings, tap the settings app, navigate to accessibility, tap on your installed apps, and here you'll see only the apps that explicitly include an accessibility service. And then it shows, toggle accessibility on, you can uninstall, but this will show you if you have anything that has this service. And it's worth mentioning there are legitimate uses for this. So some password managers that I use very similar permissions to do things like autofill. So just because something requests this permission doesn't mean it's malicious, but you should be giving this only to apps that strictly tell you exactly why they need this permission. Otherwise, do not give this to any app. And if you're unsure, hold off, do more research, maybe ask a community online, and even contact their customer support, because this is not a common permission that most apps need. Third, this is risk reduction, but I have a 4-week disappearing message timer set to all of my chats by default. So if you message me on Signal for the first time, it's going to show 4 weeks and all our messages are removed. So that means that with a situation like this, if somebody infects me with this piece of malware, at least it won't affect any of my messages from before 4 weeks before the attack happened. So you can do this in most messengers nowadays, and in Signal, you go to privacy, default timer for new chats, and set it to whatever you want. I think 4 weeks is a pretty good compromise, but this is a way to reduce your risk just a little bit in situations like this. And keep in mind, if you're sharing something like a password or an address or something you consider sensitive, you can temporarily set the timer per chat to be something like a minute. And that way it disappears after a minute, and then you could revert it back to 4 weeks. And it's just like a 1-minute segment of your chat. Now, the big spooky thing about if you are impacted, which I hope none of you are, and most of you probably aren't, is that you need to know how you were targeted and how this happened in the first place. So it's good to maybe analyze. If you installed this yourself, then it's actually probably the best news you can get, which is you actively put this on your own device. But if you just ended up with this somehow, you might have a bigger concern on your hands. And in that case, you should probably reach out to some kind of digital rights advocacy group. And the last two things I highly recommend doing, this is something you can do on both iOS and Android. On iOS, you can enable lockdown mode. Lockdown mode does what it says, which is it locks down your device. It turns off many features that are often used to infiltrate your device. And it's not something that everybody needs to do, but I do it on all of the Apple devices in my life. I made a whole video on lockdown mode and kind of what it changes, what you can expect. And if you're on an Android device with Google Play services, Google has its advanced protection program. They targets slightly different things from lockdown mode, but this is something else that you can enable. It gives you a few extra security perks as well. Make sure your device is up to date. Always keep your operating system on the newest version. They patch a lot of the ways that they can implement these exploits through security updates. And those are the takeaways from this. So are you hacked? Probably not. Is this something you should be taking into consideration? I would say so. This stuff and the fact that we're seeing this just demonstrates that encryption is doing what it's supposed to do. Not that long ago, it was far easier for an attacker to do something called a man-in-the-middle attack, where they impersonate a service, they steal your information, and you're not even involved in any of that. It's totally out of your control. But because we have end-to-end encryption as such a staple tool nowadays, it's actually easier to try to get into your device rather than trying to break the encryption in any meaningful way. So this means that encryption works, but that also means you have to also make sure you keep your device secure. And that is the endpoint security that we were talking about. And hopefully the tips I gave will help you keep everything safe. So if you're on Android, check your accessibility permissions right now. If you're on any device, I would still do a quick check over your apps to see if everything looks good. And if you enjoy this content and you learned something from this video, definitely go ahead and support Techlore. We have a lot of fun ways to support what we're doing, so we can keep you all educated on how to keep yourself safe out there and how to spread digital rights to yourself and all the people around you. I want to thank you all for being here. It's an honor to be here always, and I'll see you next time on Techlore.